What is up? This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, vanguardne.ca. I'm Norman James in London, Ontario, Canada, joined by my podcast partner in crime, one of my best friends of all time, the greatest ever, the one and only, Michael Piaggello in Cheektowaga, New York. Michael, I outdid the intro from last time, I think.
Yes, you did. Good morning, Norman. From frigid Cheektowaga. I'm tired of the single-digit Fahrenheit temperatures.
Well, I like how you taught me something right on the spot. It's Cheektowaga, not Cheektowaga. I'm thinking of Irv Weinstein, man, the great one. Leafs fandom is a tire fire right now. You know, we're a part of that, but half of Leafs fans are in fear of what's to come with Boston, and the other half of Leaf fans don't think Boston really equates to much because their data points to the Leafs winning a Stanley Cup with certain ease. For us, Mike, we're feeling the pressure as fans, knowing that the Boston Bruins have won a ton of games, 18 games in a row with a point. They're 4 clear of the Leafs in the standings, and they just look like they're revving their engines on all cylinders. Now, the question is, are they going to burn out in time for the Maple Leafs to be able to take advantage of them, or are they just basically sending a message to not only the Leafs but the rest of the league? The Bruins are ready to play. They know the playoffs are around the corner, and Godspeed if you try to take them on.
Well, the glass is half full person would say they're using up their magic now. And, that 6 weeks before the playoffs, you're not going to peak.
Yeah.
It's bad to peak. But honestly, they've been this way for, the last, I'd say 3 months where they, and now I know that the 18 game point streak started before the All-Star break, but they've been a pretty solid team since they got Bergeron and Chara back from injury. So,
yeah.
And they're doing this without Pasternak. So, I mean, I think that Leaf fans who are, shaking their heads that they have to play this team in the first round are right on target. And it's going to be a challenge for this team to beat the Bruins because they provide a matchup problem because they do what the Leafs don't. They're a physical team, but they also have skill. And the Leafs are going to have to outskill a very skilled team. So it's going to be a tough road to hoe for the Leafs.
A lot of Leaf fans are just stuck in fantasy. My neighbor, great guy, huge supporter of the Leafs Convo. We talk Boston. He's like, well, you know what? They're hot at the right time for them, but they'll cool off and the Leafs will be able to. What's that? Because historically, the Leafs have been able to do what against the Boston Bruins? Mike, why on earth would you want to do anything other than play well all the time?
Well, I can just hear, and believe me, I'm not predicting, I'm not hoping that the Bruins beat the Leafs. I'm trying to be someone who's playing it down the middle. I can see that if the Leafs lose to the Bruins in the first round, you will have massive complaints from the media and from fans regarding the NHL playoff format and the unfairness of playing the Bruins in the first round. I agree. I think the playoff format sucks, but
I agree.
You know what you have to do? You have to beat the opponent that's in front of you. And, I think right now, the way the Leafs are playing and the way the Bruins are playing, it's going to be really tough for them to beat him. I mean, they're going to need Freddie Anderson to stand on his head, and they're going to need guys like Tavares and Matthews to really step up. I'm not saying it's impossible, but right now it looks pretty tough.
I'm rooting for the Leafs all the way.
The commentary after the game, if you look at the quote that Mike Babcock made about the fourth line, about the fact that he doesn't. The way he insinuated it is he doesn't have the tools to work with, and they didn't go out and get any sandpaper or an experience at up front or on the blue line at the deadline. All they did was the Patan for Par Lindholm deal. And, he referenced, we have to have guys who penalty kill. And Lindholm was one of their penalty killers. So I just get the impression, and I'm just reading into it. And sometimes when you analyze things, you're off base. But I get the impression Babcock is not happy with the moves or lack of moves that they made before the deadline and now feels I think the comments that he made were sort of like, well, if we lose, it's not my fault. We didn't get the players that we needed. Well, and but honestly, the last couple of years, what the hell did Brian Boyle and Thomas Plekanec do? Absolutely friggin' nothing. And those were guys that Babcock wanted.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. He wanted them. The old guy brought them in. Now what happens when Kyle Dubas doesn't do anything and relies on his crew from the AHL who will get destroyed because they're not good enough? What happens now? Does everything point back to Mike Babcock and it being his fault? That's what I'm concerned about, because this guy should be the head coach of the team when the team wins a Stanley Cup, because it's not going to be Sheldon Keefe. It won't be. Anybody who thinks that is in a dream world. Go like another team, because that's not going to be the case. I know a lot of people want it to be, because it'd be just the perfect scenario, because the spreadsheet and the data sheet will tell us that Kyle Dubas will be the greatest general manager, and Sheldon Keefe will be his head coach, and Martin Marincin will win the Conn Smythe. It's never happening. You need to have an elixir and a concoction of things that work and that will make sense and that will bring you success, even if you don't like them because they're older than you and you think that they're overbearing. Dubas and Babcock are going to have to figure out how to work together to make this work. And the people like us who are good fans and who care are going to have to work with people, other fans who don't really like guys like us and guys like Babcock and the older generation or tougher generation. They're going to have to figure out how to reconcile that we're a part of this process too.
I just think comments that Babcock made, and maybe I'm overreacting to them, but I think a lot of other people have mentioned the same thing. It almost smacked of sort of laying the groundwork for blame. And it's like, that's defeatist. So,
yeah, that's not good.
So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we never find out. Maybe what the Leafs did or didn't do at the deadline won't affect anything, and they'll actually step up and win against the Bruins and have a successful playoff. I'm sure most of the people who are listening to the show are hoping that, but I'm just saying right now, the indicators. I mean, he did it before the deadline in terms of, well, we need this or we need that. He did that with Lou Lamoriello. Babcock threw subtle hints out there and not so subtle hits during morning skate or before morning skates when he talked to the media about we need this or we need that. And they, Nick Patan, who he played at center, and I don't think is somebody he envisions as a center, or I don't know if he even envisions him as a fourth liner.
Yeah.
He was not happy after the game. He says he couldn't play them in the defensive zone. So I think that you're not going to see Patan, Moore, and Innes starting as the fourth line in the postseason.
A lot of people are afraid of improvement. It's a scary thing. It's cringy. People don't want to improve. This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James with Mike Augello. We do what we do for our good friends at Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough. VanguardNE.ca. The Leafs can only control what the Leafs can control. And watching Boston do what it's doing is an intimidating thing. It's a cringy thing. It's an anxiety-inducing thing. But it's a lot of smoke and a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, because the Leafs really can't get their hands on the Bruins. They can't get in there and change the direction of where the Bruins are going or affect what the Bruins are doing. All they can do is watch it. I mean, it's just like a show that is difficult to watch if you're the opposition, great to watch if you're a Bruins fan. Getting back to what the Maple Leafs have to do right now, Mike, is between now and the end of the season, and this is where we can be constructive, and this is where we can bring some extra value to this podcast. Let's talk about ways that this team can improve without throwing anybody under the bus or pointing the fingers at the general manager, the head coach, or certain players, or the way the lineup is put together. What can this team do between now and Game 82 to prepare itself the best it can to be as successful as it can when the playoffs roll around? Let's not even think about Boston right now, because that's just going to drive us nuts. What can the Leafs do starting against Edmonton to begin readying itself even more for the big challenge to come?
Well, I'm not sure they really can, simply because, I mean, in terms of like the defense, they overworked their top four against Vancouver. The defensive lineup is only changing by one, putting in Ozhiganov for Justin Hall. So maybe the minutes will be distributed more evenly, but that's a big question mark, because you don't know when Gardner's going to come back, if at all, and you don't know when Dermott's going to come back. So you're locked into that, and obviously with the comments that Babcock made, you're locked into a rotating four of Moore, Innes, Patan, and Gauthier at the forward line, and they only have 3 call-ups from the Marlies. They can make 3 emergency recalls after the deadline, so you're limited in terms of what you can do. I'm sure that once Callie Rosen is healthy, he'll probably be one of those guys who's called up, but he isn't even skating with the Marlies right now. So, I mean, honestly, the only thing I think that you can really do other than what you've done so far is, and Babcock has intimated this recently, is how many games you're going to play Anderson down the stretch. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're at a point where you're 4 points behind the Bruins, not to say you're giving up, but because you're not, and the Bruins play, I think, 4 of their last 14 games on the road. Babcock has hinted that he's going to play Anderson a little less and not overwork him. I think he mentioned 56 games, which is ridiculous because that would be an equal split of him and Sparks going down the stretch. That's not going to happen. But if they lighten the load on Anderson, then the excuse of him being spent when you get to game 1 against the Bruins in the playoffs, that goes out the window. But honestly, I think home ice advantage is pretty valuable. And if you have a chance to get it, you have to play Anderson.
Babcock versus Dubas. If there's a detente between those two, or things are beginning to bubble up under the surface, no matter what, the team, the organization, fans, we really can't lament it or antagonize that rift between now and however long the Leafs continue to play for, because aren't we all in this to watch the Leafs conquer Mount Boston and get on to the next round and maybe go on a crazy run and win the Stanley Cup? That's what we want. Beyond that, because look at Leaf fans, let's be honest, a lot of Leaf fans, we hate each other. Like I get along better with fans of other teams than Leaf fans, because we just hate each other. We talk about the Leafs and say, hey, the Leafs did a great job today. People react to us as if we said something horrific and it's our fault. That's the way Leaf fans are. And I don't know if it's passion or if it's stupidity or if it's a little bit of both. But what I'm concerned about is a Babcock versus Dubas narrative that is going to ramp up. We're going to begin putting blame in either the Dubas basket or the Babcock basket, and it's going to be a sort of a competition as to who is going to absorb most of the blame for this team's deficiencies or the things they lack. Kyle Dubas isn't going to give Mike Babcock all the things that he wants for a couple of reasons. One, we've seen that a lot of these veteran guys who come in for a lot of times a pick or something of value that the Leafs probably use down the line don't seem to work out. But on the other hand, maybe the Leafs just aren't ready to start sending away key prospects for the cherry on top.
Well, I'll just say this to finish things out. If they lose in the first round, this is going to be the narrative over the summer. It's going to be the signings of Marner and all the other free agents, what they do to improve their defense, because their defense, if they lose in the first round, will likely be the cause of their loss. And, the dynamic of Babcock versus Dubas in terms of, one providing the other with the players that they want, or the other one being able to work with the players he's given. Mm-hmm. That's it. Until the offseason, this is a moot point.
In the meantime, the Oilers, Leafs, just go in there, have some fun, be the best they can, go win a hockey game, Mike. I mean, other than that, what else can you say? There's no point gripping your stick too tight right now. Leafs are playing pretty well. Just go in and have some fun, right?
I mean, the Oilers actually have turned it on the last few games. I think they've won 4 in a row. And, after they got demolished against the Leafs earlier before the deadline, I believe. I think it was 6-1. I mean, it was not a pretty game for Connor McDavid, and you could see the look on his face. So, I mean, I'm sure Edmonton's going to be riled up, and there'll be a lot of Leaf fans in the stands at the arena in Edmonton.
I'll wrap it up with this, Mike. Mike Babcock and his old way of thinking and the expectations that he has of how a hockey team should come together is not going to win a Stanley Cup, not only in Toronto, anywhere, without evolving, without understanding the game has changed, the dynamics of the game has changed, the way you put together a team is much different than it once was. The guy knows more than we do. But what I'm saying is, the projection of angst or frustration based on lack of talent that you think you need to have or that you wanted to have is, especially publicly, is just not going to work. It's going to make things worse. Kyle Dubas, the jury's still out on this guy. If people think he's the general manager for the Leafs for life, they're kidding themselves. He could be fired. He could be fired next week. He's not locked into a job. Remember, you don't just get stuff because you think you deserve it. You get it because you earn it, and you have to keep it. So the best scenario for all of us here is to watch the Leafs find a gear, beat Boston somehow by hook or by crook. Babcock satisfied, Dubas is satisfied. These guys stay on page, stay on message, work together, in the next 2 or 3 years, this Leafs team wins a couple of cups, Bob's your uncle. I know it sounds simple, but it's going to be hard. It's a challenge. The likelihood of it happening is less than the likelihood of it happening. But, I honestly think we're better together as opposed to apart. Question is, can we get it done? Michael, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, Norman.
Thanks for listening to the Leafs Convo podcast, as always presented by Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, vanguardne.ca. Talk to you next time.